Yeah. There, here. Let's see. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Here we are on our third day of Sesshin, which is so good to get here. It's the third day. And I just want to thank all the hard workers here. I know this is Jamie's first time during the session, doing a session, and I really appreciate your presence here. Thank you. Everything is looking so beautiful. So I wanted to begin today's talk with a mountain rising 8,000 feet above on the floor of the Bighorn Basin in Wyoming. And you can see it for miles in every direction. And I got to walk to the top of this mountain when I visited it. The Crow people, the Apsaaluk, I don't know how to say their name, called it Ikapilish Ilapix, or known as Four Tops' father. We know it as Heart Mountain. So the story goes that there was a Crow warrior named Four Top because of a special way he had his hair, who traveled to this mountain and fasted. And he had a vision. A spirit told him, wear your hair this way and you will live until the mountain crumbles. Fight the Blackfeet and you will never lose. And so the story goes, the mountain became his father, his protector. And years later, a part of it crumbled away and he was killed in battle. But this story is very important for the Crow people. And they called the mountain this name that I said I can't say it again, but Four Tops' father, because it was his adopted father and protector of the Crow people. Until the United States took it away in the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 drew a line for the Crow, and the mountain was outside the line. And in 1942, our government built a concentration camp on this land. And they called it Heart Mountain Relocation Center. 10,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese nationals lived behind its barbed wires, mostly Japanese Americans. And 15 of them were my family. So this mountain that the Crow called their father and protector watched over a prison camp for people who looked like the enemy, who looked like me. Land taken from a people to imprison another people. And yet the Japanese Americans in that camp, they also looked at that mountain and they called it a sentinel, a presence, a companion in their confinement. And I know of a man who was a little boy who walked from the camp all the way up to the top of the mountain and back. And people were looking all over for him, you know, they didn't know where he was, but he made it back. And Nyogen Senzaki, a Zen master, was also imprisoned there. And he called that mountain the mountain of compassion. So I started reading this book, and it's been on my bedside table for a long time. And it's called Facing the Mountain, and it's written by Daniel James Brown. He was the one who wrote a New York bestseller called The Boys in the Boat. Seen that? It's about a college team that makes it to the Olympics. And George Clooney was the director. I think I saw it. It was really good. Anyway, he wrote this book, and I think that I was kind of resisting reading this book because what would Daniel James Brown know about the internment experience, the incarceration experience? Well, I just decided I was going to stop watching Netflix and I was going to start reading. It was time to read. And you know, I haven't been able to put it down actually. Because this is about my family. On my father's side, incarcerated at Heart Mountain, first they went to the Santa Anita racetrack in Los Angeles, which they stayed there. I don't know for how long, but they said it smelled like horse manure in there. These were the people at Heart Mountain, my Uncle Ralph Kawabe and Auntie Madge, and their daughters, Keiko and Francine. They were little. Uncle Sumio Tanoue and his wife, my Auntie Tai, her mother, Kinu Kamouchi, and their daughter, Rosalind, who was young. Auntie Jenny, Kimiko Yamamoto, her son, Chikao, and his wife, Terry, her son, Harry Kazumi, and daughter, Catherine Yukiko Yamamoto, Auntie Doris Kataura, her husband, George, George's mother, Hisa, and their children, Yoshiko, Shirley, and Glenn. Uncle Sumio actually joined the Military Intelligence Service, the MIS, at a time when it was kind of controversial, right? They were imprisoned, and yet our government sent out a call to duty. And so there were, you know, people who said, they want us to go to war and we're in here. Are they nuts? Well, there was a contingent of them. Well, my uncle joined up. He could speak Japanese, so he joined the intelligence service. He was also the first college graduate as a pharmacist from USC in California. So he was actually working as a pharmacist. And he was working at a pharmacist at the Heart Mountain as well. But when he joined up, he was, you know, translating documents that they got from the Japanese. And he evidently read something where the Japanese were using pigs to try to get some kind of antibiotics, for all of the people injured during the war. And at that time, I don't think penicillin was so readily available. So, just a little bit of history. Um, oh, and that's on my father's side. And on my mother's side, my grandfather was imprisoned because he was, I think, the president of the Japanese School Board of Directors in Hawaii, a small school. So they took all of the leaders of the community. He also had a small country store. And because he was able to read and write Japanese, he helped the local people send letters to Japan, and he would help translate, for family back home. And his two sons, my uncle Tadayuki Nash Tahara and Yoshiyuki Fat Tahara was his name, they both enlisted, and they were in the 100th Battalion, which saw a tremendous amount of casualty during the war. And I'm just learning so much just reading about, what they had to endure. So Pearl Harbor was bombed December 7th, 1941. And that caused the United States to enter the war. They had been like, I don't think we're going to do this. And then Pearl Harbor was bombed, and it's like, okay, I guess we better get into the war here. So in February 1942, I think some people know the date, Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which imprisoned forcibly, well, 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans, mostly on the West Coast, forcing them from their homes, given days, sometimes hours, to dispose of their property, their businesses, and try to make a life, this new life, where they were herded into these assembly centers like Santa Anita racetrack. And then on to, there were like 10 to 15, I think, concentration camps across the country, mostly in these desolate places like Heart Mountain in Wyoming, Arizona, Alabama. And yet, when the call for volunteers came out, there were a number of people who volunteered from inside the camps, from inside the wire, the barbed wire. In Hawaii, it was different there because there were so many Japanese Americans. They couldn't contain all of them, so they took just the leaders. And when there was a call for 1,000 volunteers in Hawaii, 10,000 volunteered. And they joined the 100th and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. And their motto was go for broke, which means hold nothing back. Almost like our koan studies. Hold nothing back. It's like wager everything. Just give it your best. your best and don't let anything get in your way like fear. And then the men who worked in the military intelligence service, they were all in the background. Nobody knew anything that they did, but they were really important in translating documents and serving as interpreters, where it's known that their work shortened the war because of this service. And yet they could not talk about their work for 30 years after the war. They couldn't tell anybody what they did. My cousin said that, his father tried to make a life again. And one of the things that I know my cousin was really upset about was that his father, when he got back from the war, he couldn't even get a haircut because of the way he looked. Nobody wanted to serve him. Mm. So that was an impossible koan, life koan for them. So the Japanese have a word, gaman, as a practice, gaman, which means, or it's often translated as to endure with patience and dignity. To endure with patience and dignity. To bear what cannot be borne without complaint. To remain upright when the ground has been taken away. So the Issei, the first generation, and the Nisei that were imprisoned, this was their word. So when the orders came, when they were imprisoned, they did not riot. They built gardens in the camps. Heart Mountain, they were lucky to have some horticulturalists there who turned the garden into a marvel of growth of agriculture to feed not only Heart Mountain, but they sent food to other camps. Um, they held Buddhist services, they had baseball games there. And they tried to, make the most of what they had. Gaman, uh, a fierce interior yes to life. But there's also this deep wound that you're also holding at the same time. Right. And who knows what was passed on to later generations. But I know they never talked about it. Never. That's Gaman also. So our first bodhisattva, our first noble truth, life is suffering. I think that the Issei and the Nisei definitely saw that as the truth and as also the ground of practice. So somebody else, I mean, this wonderful Zen master was also at Heart Mountain, Nyogen Senzaki, a Rinzai Zen priest. who Maizumi Roshi knew, and every year would go to his grave to honor Senzaki Roshi. And Senzaki Roshi came to this country in 1905, and he called himself a mushroom monk. No temple, no institution, no fixed roots. He would serve where he was. And there he was in Heart Mountain. He carried what he called, quote, a floating zendo. Wherever he went, a meditation hall appeared. There he was. So he designated his barrack, Block 2, Barrack 9, as a zendo. He called it the Meditation Hall of Eastbound Training, Eastbound Teaching, Eastbound Teaching. Right? Remember, he called Heart Mountain the Mountain of Compassion. He wrote in his temple dedication this verse: in this snow-covered desert of internment, a Wyoming plateau, he has nothing to do with the trivialities of the dusty world. He rather prefers to sit alone, burning the lamp of Dharma. And on the first anniversary of Pearl Harbor, sitting inside the camp, he wrote, he was a poet, a swarm of demons infests the whole of humanity. It resembles the scenery of Gaia, where Buddha fought his last battle to attain realization. We, Zen students in this internment, meditate today to commemorate the enlightened one. We sit firmly in this zendo while the cold wind of the plateau pierces to our bones. They were on about 4,000 feet elevation, this plateau. So that's cold most of the time. I mean, in Waimea, we were at 3,000 feet elevation, and it was cold in the winter time. The cold wind of the plateau pierces to our bones. He does not say the cold wind does not touch us because we are practicing Zen. He does not say our meditation insulates us from suffering. He says we sit. The cold wind pierces. We sit anyway. There's a few more poems he wrote. Children's kites fly proudly beyond the fence, above the sky, outwitting the barbed wire. So he wrote this, he called it, or it's called Uta, Japanese odes. He was good at that, Japanese odes. Here's another one. A sandstorm ceases howling, then a blizzard comes. When the piling snow melts, the wind raises dust again, till the snow takes its place. With such repetition, winter reigns its plateau. Such, I'll read that again. It's kind of like it's constant suffering out there in terms of the temperature. I mean, the weather. And I'm such a spoiled Hawaiian girl. I just can't imagine. Okay. A sandstorm ceases howling, then a blizzard comes. When the piling snow melts, the wind raises dust again, till the snow takes its place. With such repetition, Winter reigns its plateau. And one final one. One night, all houses were hidden in the mist, and nothing but lights remained in the whole plateau. One night, all houses were hidden in the mist, and nothing but lights remained in the whole plateau. So, right, this is your life koan there. Yeah, some of us can relate, I think, to this. So, in 1990, my father wrote a letter to the U.S. Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, Office of Redress Administration, claiming his remedy under the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. My name is Robert Naoyuki Tanoue. I was born January 6, 1919, in Pawilo, Hawaii. I was drafted in August 1940 while attending Frank Wiggins Trade School in Los Angeles, studying auto mechanics and living with my sister Madge. I did basic training at Camp Grant, Illinois, then Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, then Billings General Hospital. I was a medical corpsman for the duration of the war. In May 1942, when the evacuation orders came, I applied for furlough, not to rest, but to help my sister and family make the move to the camps, to help them pack, to try to sell their belongings before they were taken. Denied. My car, my automotive tools, everything I had left with my sister Madge, all of it were lost. All of it was lost when Madge and her husband Ralph and their young daughter were evacuated to Heart Mountain. In August 1942, I tried again to visit them at the Pomona Assembly Center. Denied. Too busy at the hospital, they said. February 1943, I tried a third time. Heart Mountain Relocation Center, Wyoming. Denied again. However, I took furlough, and without notifying the Army, I did go to Heart Mountain, Wyoming to see my family. On that occasion, I did ask the guard at the gate, "How come you have my sisters and brothers and relatives in a concentration camp while I am in the U.S. Army wearing this uniform serving my country?" To which the poor guy turned red and couldn't say anything. So it's kind of interesting. Here he is at the gate with the guard. And as he's telling the story, he says, to which the poor guy, he has some compassion for this guard. He's just doing his job. I mean, I remember he remembers, the guard towers, and the guards are looking in instead of protecting the people, they're looking in with their guns pointed toward the people. He continues in the letter, "I, as an American citizen, and above all, a member of the armed forces of the United States, who served honorably for 5 years in the medical corps, was denied the liberty and right through a directive of the Army to travel freely, simply based upon the fact that I was of Japanese descent And the government of the United States did violate my constitutional rights. And so this was when anyone who was still alive yet could apply to the Office of Redress Administration for $20,000 compensation. And so based on this letter, he was awarded that. As were, I remember my Uncle Ralph, he was telling me there is no amount of money they can pay me to ever redress what they did to me. He was just furious about that. And there's a story of another young man, young then, and his name was Gordon Hirabayashi. He was from Spokane up there, up north, Pacific Northwest. And he was a Quaker. And when the curfew orders came for Japanese Americans in 1942, he didn't comply. And he violated the curfew deliberately because it was not constitutional. He walked into the FBI office and turned himself in. And so they actually arrested him. He wanted a court case. He wanted to force America to look at what they're doing, not just to him, but to the 120,000 Americans that they unconstitutionally took. And he was willing to go to prison to prove it. That was another kind of resistance. He was convicted. He appealed all the way to the Supreme Court and lost in 1943. He was sentenced to a work camp in Arizona, and he was up in Spokane. And they had no way to get him there, so he said he'll get himself there. And he hitchhiked his own way there to Arizona. I think it was in Tucson. And he kept appealing. He kept appealing. Quietly, persistently, without bitterness, but he kept at it. In 1987, 44 years after his conviction, it was vacated in 1987. And in 2012, President Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And near the end of his life, Gordon Hirabayashi said, if I were to live my life over again, I would do the same thing. Talk about living by principles and vow, isn't it? The long vow, long vow. Right, the Bodhisattva vow, not just for now, but for the generations to come. Wow, what bodhicitta he must have. Open heart mind, awaken heart mind. So there were 5 responses to this impossible koan that the war brought up. Right, there's Zen Master Nyogen Senzaki was to sit, burn the lamp of Dharma, call the Baraka Zendo. Then there was the 442nd and the 100th. Go for broke. I mean, the 100th, I can't believe my uncles they made it through. They were at the Lost Battalion up in the Vosges Mountains. I think this is up in France. The Germans had surrounded Texans, and the 100th went in to save them and sustained tremendous casualties. Um, as they were coming back, as the battalions or the 100th were coming back, there's a story that I don't know which uncle it was, but they would call out to see if they were still alive, and they were. It's like amazing. And then there's Gordon Hirabayashi, right? Living his principles. He was not going to voluntarily commit himself. Instead, he got arrested on principle. My uncle, who translated the enemy's secrets, all in the background, nobody knew about it for 30 years. And my father, just leaving. I mean, he got out of the army honorably discharged. So I guess, but he just left and he went and he spoke the truth to the guard. So all different forms of dharmic action. So that's my talk today. So if there's any uh, questions or comments, uh, facing the mountain, what mountain are you facing now? Patience and dignity. Endurance and resistance. Endurance and resistance. I know I'm reading about this too. When Gordon was imprisoned in jail in Spokane, he actually then made friends with all of the prisoners and became like their spokesperson, trying to better the conditions in the jail. I mean, I'm reading this and I'm just crying. I'm crying reading this. And my cousin and I put this together on our family, our paternal family, kind of a genealogy, which is where I learned about my uncle Sumio and his translation work. It's really from my cousin. And yeah, they just imprisoned people like this because of the way they looked. And of course, it's not, I mean, what's going on right now because of the way Latino people look, and that injustice is just terrible. I know it's kind of a heavy subject here, but this is alive for me. I'm really seeing how my ancestors, um, they live in me. They live in me. And it was interesting when the 442 boys, so there were people in the camps, the young men in the camps who volunteered, and the boys from Hawaii. And there was really actually some friction. They called the Japanese Americans on the continent kotonks. They call them maybe something to do with their head, kotonk. And then the Hawaii Japanese boys were called Buddha heads. Not exactly sure why, but there was a lot of friction there. Maybe fighting a lot, actually, maybe for whatever reason. But they went to train out at Camp Shelby in Alabama, and we passed by Camp Shelby on our drive back home. And I was like, Camp Shelby, this is where they train. There's a lot of wooded area in Alabama. And the upper brass, whatever, they just didn't know what to do with all this fighting because they knew they would have to come together as a cohesive team to fight the Germans. So somebody had a really good idea and said, have the Hawaii boys, now that you're in Alabama, there were two camps in Arkansas, concentration camps. Have them go visit those camps so they understood what the continental Japanese American boys, their mindset, they were coming from the camps and having to fight. So that's a whole different thing. Anyway, that then there's less fighting. The Hawaii boys understood what the the Japanese Americans on the continent were going through, and that kind of bonded. They understood.
Is there still animosity, Roshi?
No,
No.
no. So, what are some of the mountains in your life right now that are that you're trying to face, or you're facing, shall we say, not trying, facing?
3 more days.
3 more days. Okay, that's Ungo. Ungo is like, he's got a great sense of humor, right? You know? Anybody want to share? What mountains are you facing in your practice right now? We call practice your life.
I think like the victims and perpetrators alike, because I try to identify with the victims or easy to have compassion victims versus perpetrators. And actually my family was in Japan. And so I had two kamikaze uncles, one I think he was in the army, and my grandfather was in the Navy, as a Navy officer. And yeah, life in Japan was very different. Also a lot of suffering. And so, yeah, it's just something that I sit with, being seen as the enemy, like the country of Japan as the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, war is obsolete, as the Dalai Lama says. War is obsolete. There's a story in here of they were in Italy, and all the communication systems, it wasn't working, right? And the battalions, the 442nd, they were just getting clobbered by the Germans. And one young man was a runner, just in case there was uh, no way to get through telephone or whatever, right? They would have a runner to get the information to the headquarters or whatever, the larger force. And there was one runner who was running back because nobody knew they were getting clobbered because the communication. And as he was running back, he saw there was a lone German um, with a machine gun, and then the bigger troop that was advancing on toward the gunner. And so the gunner didn't see him, and so he did kill the gunner. And then he made a mistake. Like they say, don't look at anything if you kill somebody. But he did. He rifled through his pockets and took out a photograph with three young children that he was the father of. And he just totally, he said his stomach lurched and he just felt sick. And yeah, war is obsolete.
Well, I wish it's obsolete. It's not obsolete to me. That's the world I live in. It's at war and I can't understand any of it, but that's the mountain I'm facing. And I can't believe my own president. So can't believe anything he says. And boy, it's confusing. That's a mountain for me. And that's real. That's not obsolete. So, and I'm suffering from it. I'm not in that war. Well, I guess I am. And I feel somehow I'm also implicated in it. So, it's hard for me to stand outside of it and just blame one group or the Republicans or MAGA or Trump or his asshole cabinet, incompetent. And it's complicated. It's not so simple because Iran is a terrible government. I mean, really awful. So that's my mountain. And I don't. What is an easy or a lazy way to talk about it? It's a big mountain for me. And I'm pissed off about the whole thing. So there's pain for you and your family. I feel like I've been bearing witness to your pain this morning. And I think the humiliation that Japanese people felt had to be so painful. And I hear it in you. I hear it in you needing to still talk about it. And I guess what it brings up for me is that we're doing it again. And they're buying these huge warehouses and they're going to use them. If they buy them, they're going to use them. They're going to fill them up with people and they're going to be for-profit prisons. People are going to make money off of this. And there's going to be an incentive to put people in there so they can make money. I mean, that is just disgusting. That is immoral. It's I don't know what's happened to our country. I don't know what's happening to me, but we're doing it again. And so that's what I hear when I hear you talking about this, is that we're doing it again. And it's
I know, and the cry was like, never again, never again. We can't do this to people. This is not right. And yet it's happening again. So what do we do? What do we do?
Student for Solidarity has a group that's marching on Saturday in China. And I shared with Roshi June that there's short educational films and a curriculum that's been put together to teach about the Japanese American experience. It'll be right in the fall, the curriculum. So it's like a lot of people still don't even know about the Japanese incarceration. It's only required to be taught in the United States, but the teachers don't have curriculum. So we don't know how well it's being taught, if it's actually being taught. So education is important.
For sure, education is important.
I was gonna say the mountain I'm facing is clarity, kind of going off what you're saying, clarity on how I can do better in this world and how I have already been a part of the problem for so long. just kind of having awareness in both, where have I stepped in the wrong direction, where can I step in the good direction where I have. And I think, that it's something there's a mountain that I can't even see the summit, but I think I'm rattling the idea of what can we do, and exactly as you're saying, I feel that the world is repeating its terrors, it's repeating itself. And what we can do is exactly what you're doing on this chair here today is education and remembering and igniting that fire in people again through your story and through your experiences and your family's experiences. And as we continue to connect into our humanness of just conversation and education, I think we could change our communities, therefore the world. So I'm trying to tap into that, but you're asking how can we do this? I feel like you are in your own way, definitely. But mine is clarity. How can my story help, and how can we not repeat ourselves in this awful world, yet beautiful world we're living in at the same time? The duality of it is the same, but just clarity. I need that clarity to figure out my path. So
Thank you. Yeah. So I like the image of the Senzaki sitting with the piercing cold, just sitting with it's not, it is what it is, and we may not know the answer. That's one of the things we try to practice here is not knowing, and it's not giving up because just because you don't know, we'll just hang in there and just have to bear witness to what is and what's being done and where, not knowing and bearing witness. If we do it well, some kind of healing action will arise. Having that faith, that unshakable faith in wisdom and compassion arising.
No, Roshi, very moved. Roshi as well. I think in your story, just sharing the generosity of the people. When you talked about them sending food to other camps, at a time of knowing that they're in their own poverty state, and building a Zendo out of barracks. I think that's just so important to tell about the lives, right? About practice through it. Like my experience with the Holocaust in my family is that most people will say, yeah, 6 million Jews were killed. And that's the story. That's the whole story. But that's not the whole story. There's really not a lot of discussion about the minute to minute daily lives of the people and a lot of the joy that they shared in their circumstance. So when you talked about, the piercing cold and sitting, just like the talk yesterday, I'm the seeker of the way, I am the way. I can't say I can live in suffering or I can live in loving compassion, but if I choose either one, that's not gonna work. So I feel that sometimes hearing the struggles of other people, the suffering of other people, does give that kind of internal message of wow. Like I was thinking we were all sitting here in the send-up, just looking at these beautiful flowers Jordy made and listening to you, and just what a gift this precious life to be. This is what we're doing. We're not in an internment camp, we're hearing the story. And just really this practice trying to learn the gift of suffering. If that's what it is, the noble truth, if that's what it is, when am I going to embrace it?
You know, so that I can, instead of being in it and feeling like it's torture, you know, I can become angry and maybe transform that, I can into action, you know, just this practice, I'm beginning to really understand for myself what suffering. It's like the garden doesn't know that it's dirt. Yeah. But I think you just, I appreciate your tender heart that you can talk about your family. And, you know, if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Roshi. I'm really just struck by the depth of, you know, as you were telling the stories, the depth of their resilience and honor and commitment to their principles and doing what's right, even in the midst of incredible odds of, you know, how this might turn out. Commitment to doing what's right, commitment to being able to feel their heart and lead with their heart and to find beauty amidst the horror, really the horror. The people that can do that, that can find beauty and love and kindness and compassion and humanity amidst the horror. That's what gives me hope. That's where I feel hopeful that all of us have that capacity. And so many people have that capacity, and hearing your story just reaffirms that the beauty amidst the horror. And as Genshin said, the generosity that is still at play. Thank you, Roshi.
Talk about ancestry and honoring your ancestors.
Mm.
And when I think of my ancestors, my sister and cousin did one of those lineage studies, you know. And then my father's side, there was a long line of people from England and Wales, and they went on the Welsh side back to 15th century. And you know, they were just farmers and stonemasons and thieves. On the other side, that was my mother's side. Now she decided they were going to start this lineage on my mother's side, and that's a very long line of Germans. And I said, "Are you crazy? Look what you found on both sides. I don't want to know. Don't even." But she was bound before she died. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't want. You're gonna find out I'm related to Mengele? I don't think I know. But it was like, you know, and I've known a couple people, you know, my generation, who had a very hard time, who were German, lived in Germany, what a difficult time they had and still have living with that history. But at some point I need to decide, well, yeah, but my relatives might have been part of that. I don't know, but their wrongdoing, their sins were not mine. No, I made a choice not to be like that. You know, which way you gonna think, which way you're gonna go. But I still don't want to know who they were.
My father's side is German, my mother's side is Scotch.
There
And I remember thinking about, you know, I've been to Auschwitz, June, we've been to Auschwitz twice. Things are more complicated than I thought, you know, I used to think, how could they possibly have let all of those people be killed in their concentration camps? And then all of a sudden I find myself living in my own country. Kind of feeling like, oh, maybe this is what it was like there.
Yes.
But I'm here now, and this is really difficult because I can't. It was so easy to from the outside to judge them. How could they do that? How could they? And yet, I'm living in a country that's building concentration camps.
We're doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I think of the German soldiers who did these unspeakable atrocities to people, but before the war, they were probably just regular people like the rest of us, like us, middle class lives.
Mhm.
I know,
Somehow,
yeah, German
Mhm.
culture was, yeah, they had arts and Bach and
Mm.
philosophers and
Beethoven.
science and all kinds of beautiful
and
things.
so the fact that that was somehow twisted, they somehow changed, I mean, that speaks to the rest of us. You know, we can't be so high and mighty to think, no,
Mm.
I
Yeah,
would never do
Mhm.
that. Well, yeah,
yeah,
We're doing it.
because it happens generation after generation, generations.
Yeah, so that's what the Zen peacemakers were really good about in terms of trying to really recognize how we other people. And that, I mean, it was hard to say, but I'm a perpetrator, and even now, we don't even know when people are taken. We don't hear from them. We have no idea what's going on in there.
But we know what's going on.
We know what's going on, correct. So that makes us perpetrators in a sense, because we're not actively doing something about it. It's really horrifying.
I mean,
big
this
mountain.
big mountain,
Big mountain,
big
big
ass
mountain. Mm.
So, I'd like to say something, the mountain that I'm facing, so as we talk about our ancestors, my ancestors were Jewish. It's so reassuring to hear the different responses of your ancestors, because the message I got was be angry. Be angry at what happened to us. Never let it happen again, right? Fight for your rights. So, that's the mountain I'm facing, is how to be something other than angry. And I'm actually quite angry at the Israeli government, because they are now doing, in my mind, what Israel was created to be a safe haven for Jews that were in the concentration camp. And they're turning around, in my mind, and treating others the way the Jews were treated. That makes me really angry. So finding another way to be with.
Yeah, and it is hard to continue to be targeted when you're trying to do good. I have friends that work in the synagogues and the Jewish schools for the kids that are afraid to go to work. And I don't tell many people that, Jewish, because it can be problematic. My nephew, to Paul, he told my brother, Dad, I would have to wear my Jewish star inside my shirt. I'm sorry. He felt so guilty. He had been bar mitzvah, but he was being bullied at DePaul. I mean, just how we're treating each other is just.
But isn't it part of the human condition? It's always been. It's always been.
When we were in Auschwitz, the peacemakers had, the three tenets: not knowing, bearing witness, loving action. So we start with not knowing. And of course, I went to Auschwitz, thought I knew everything, I read everything, found that I knew nothing. And then we were, Rabbi Singer, we would do the Kaddish, which you probably know, we did it once here,
Yes.
here for a memorial service recently. Beautiful, beautiful memorial practice in the Jewish tradition. And so we would go to different sites at Auschwitz and sing the Kaddish. It was, were horrible places. And I couldn't have been there if I wasn't with 60 other people that were practicing with me. And then one night we were in the auditorium. This is the place. There's two parts of Auschwitz and they're massive. There's the, if you've seen the part where the trains go in with the gas
Birkenau,
chambers were.
Birkenau.
And
That's
then
Birkenau.
Auschwitz is where the Birkenau, that's Birkenau, right? And then
Mhm.
Auschwitz is where the SS officers and all of them stayed, and plus they tortured people and did awful things. We were in the auditorium of Auschwitz each night, telling stories. There'd be a fellow that his father was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he was German. Never talked about it. A Pole, whose father was a survivor, ended up abusing him. He was a victim that became perpetrator because he couldn't. The suffering was so traumatic he couldn't. So a lot of the practice in the peacemaker community is learning how to bear witness to this stuff. It is just unimaginably horrible. You can't explain away the way we other and the way we treat people. Once we do that, we can do almost anything to them. And we were in this auditorium one night, and Rabbi Singer, who's passed away, but he was wonderful. He was talking about the Kaddish, and he had a beautiful voice, he could sing, and somehow in the middle of his talk, we found ourselves dancing in the auditorium. There were like 100 people dancing. Maybe the first time anyone ever danced in that place. And when we were done, we were all kind of stunned that we had, and we were asking ourselves, and this is like at the beginning of the retreat. It was a 7-day, I think it was 7 days, wasn't it, or 5?
I think.
Yeah, it was the second night or something, and some of us were saying, are we celebrating too soon? Should we have done this at Auschwitz? Should we have been dancing at Auschwitz? And someone went up to Bernie Roshi and said, you gotta fix this. And Bernie said, I'm not here to fix anything. I'm bearing witness. And I think we have this, I apologize for being so angry here this morning, but I am. But, you know, if we're practicing with it, then we bear witness to that. And then the bearing witness is somehow we move through the suffering. We don't get stuck there. We don't get bitter by this. We don't get dried up by it and shriveled and taken down. We bear witness to it, and then we find some kind of resilience, a way to keep our dignity and open to the just incomprehensible suffering that we manage to do to each other. And I think that bearing witness practice is a huge part of spiritual path. And in our time, we're having to bear witness to equally incomprehensible sufferings going on in our own country and around the world. And the beautiful thing about the services we did in the peacemaker community, Jury mentioned it, you know, when we dedicate the merit, we always dedicate the merit to the victims and the perpetrators. Always. Because the perpetrators are suffering too. Really suffering. So
I'd like to dedicate the merits of our practice to all the victims and perpetrators of all the people facing the mountain. May they be safe, and may love be awakened.
Prepare for lunch.
Was there an energy in Auschwitz?
Huh?
Was there an energy in Auschwitz?
Was there an energy?
Yeah, I know, but I went to Wounded Knee, there was an energy there.
Oh, yeah.
That was, you just felt.
Oh, yeah, it's yeah, we heard Wounded Knee too, yeah, you feel the land has, there's something about the place and the land. Really heavy, really heavy.
Yeah, well, you spoke of that.
Yeah. But the paradox is that when you're there with some intention to open to it, it's also spiritual. In some odd way, and I couldn't have done it without other people being there with me. I couldn't have been there alone. I don't think